Welcome to the official Lawyer Minds podcast. Lawyer Minds is an ever-growing ecosystem for all the resources modern lawyers need. As the official Lawyer Minds podcast, we'll discuss everything from the latest happenings on the website to industry news. Get ready. Here we go. It's time to dive into the minds of successful lawyers. Here are your hosts, Tad Thomas and Mike Campbell.
Mike, another day, another trial continued.
Yeah, unfortunately, I was hoping to try a case in 2 weeks. I was hoping to try a case 2 weeks ago as well. Both continued.
Yeah, I had my May 1st trial continued as well. So here we are, and the year of COVID has passed, but it's still the year of COVID, isn't it?
We're fighting for trial dates, and you got to be real careful in insisting that a trial goes, because we all know the delicate balance that the courts are trying to strike in having trials, but also in making sure the public's safe. So
I have 11 trials on my calendar between now and the end of the year, and my over-under is that 6 actually go.
Yeah, I bet. I think, this one got continued out of just an abundance of caution. And, we're going to have a back-to-back situation, but I suspect come June, July, a lot of the cases are going to go. So buckle up, buddy.
Yeah, I'm ready. I can't wait. I got to lose a little weight though, so that I can actually fit in my shirts and get the neck closed. Fit the tie.
We talked yesterday. It's amazing the level of exhaustion. And if you've been, like you said, in a long depot or in trial or a very long pre-trial hearing, it's this heaviness behind your eyes, your brain starts to shut down, and you're just tired. And that's how I'm feeling. That's how I'm feeling.
Well, while you were, fooling around with pretrial motions and your however many hour pretrial yesterday, only to find out that your case was continued, I got a chance to interview Tony Romanucci from Chicago, and one of the attorneys on the George Floyd case.
Yeah, I had the opportunity to listen in, and I'm really sorry that I didn't get to participate, because, Tony is so well known for his civil rights activism, and then representing people like the George Floyd family and other notable cases. What an interview. Yeah.
It's I'm looking forward to everybody to hear it. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get straight to Tony Romanucci. Tony, thanks for being on the podcast. Appreciate it, man.
Well, Tad, thank you very much, and I hope you had a good holiday. Appreciate being on.
I did. So Tony, I've gotten to know you pretty well over the last couple of years and hanging out in Chicago with you. And, you got a great story, and you've built a great firm there in Chicago. Tell us just a little bit about your firm to start with.
Well, my firm, Tad, it's hard to say, what it is now, because I know where we started. My partner and I started the firm over 23 years ago. And it's just a great story, because we love to tell it, because it really gives hope for anybody. We started our firm with not very much. We shared a card table in a rented office, and we hung a plastic grocery bag over the door to be our garbage bag. And fax machine was on the floor. There was one phone that we shared, and we rented a way too big of a copy machine for us. You would have thought that we were, a Fortune 500 company. And that's how we started the firm. And today, we have, I think, 18 or 19 lawyers. We have, close to 40 staff members, and, really nice offices in downtown Chicago. And what I say to be, just a great firm, a great team of players. Everybody that's in our firm knows that we're in this because we have a love for what we do. And we really appreciate and acknowledge the fact that we are messengers for our clients. And we want to make sure that we're always doing the right thing.
What did you do before you all opened your own firm? Did you work somewhere else?
I did. And I really owe a lot of my background to what I do right now to when I was the age of 23. It was my second year of law school. And I was really fortunate. I was able to get what's here in Illinois, it's called a 7-Eleven internship. And what it is that you can intern with a public agency and you can practice as a lawyer so long as there's another lawyer in the courtroom with you. And I got a 7-Eleven with the Cook County Public Defender's Office. And look, I didn't know very much about poverty or poor people or defending indigents before I got the job with Cook County. I didn't know much about Chicago Police Department and its reputation. I didn't know much about what it was like to live poor. But I learned very quickly. And the things that I learned there became the absolute base for who I am now and what our practice is, because that's where I learned that people have rights, they have constitutional rights, they have human rights, they have rights to be dignified. And I am a proponent of ensuring that people's rights are maintained, not only, by our human rights, but by our constitutional rights.
So did you go straight from there to opening your own firm then?
No, from there, I spent about 3-4 years in the public defender's office. And then I got my first job in the private sector with a solo practitioner. It was a little bit of a general practice, but I did continue to do criminal defense work. And then from there, I went on to a little bit of a larger PI firm. There were about maybe 7 attorneys there. And I didn't do criminal defense work anymore, but that's where I transitioned into plaintiff's work. And in plaintiff's work, I, maintained my practice in representing obviously plaintiffs, but also people that had their rights violated. And then once we started Romanucci and Blandon, that's where I really continued the practice in the civil rights. And that's what for myself personally, that's mostly what I do, although, we deal in other practice areas, but I really feel, comfortable and most at ease representing people that had their, Fourth Amendment rights violated.
So tell me a little bit more about your civil rights practice. And you mentioned you went from the criminal side in the public defender's office to then doing the civil cases. Was there an uptick or a learning curve that you had to master?
Well, yeah, without doubt. And, for any young lawyer that's listening to this, they don't call it the practice of law for nothing. It takes years and years to get to really understand what you're doing. So it takes a long while. Representing criminal defendants, Tad, you have to imagine, I was in the public defender's office and, my day would start where the jail guard would open the door to the cell where all the overnight inmates were. And he'd unlock the door, let me in and close it behind me. And there I was with, anywhere from 20 to 40 defendants who were in overnight lockup, and I'd have to do their bond hearings. And, from there, I transitioned over to gun court. And that's where I really learned about this police narrative, where police officers, in order to either maintain quotas or get bad guys off the streets, they would arrest or stop people unconstitutionally. It was amazing how every police officer would encounter somebody, and they would always have the butt of a gun sticking out from their waistband, or the butt of the gun would be sticking out from underneath the front seat of the car. And the purpose for that, for any lawyer listening, would be obvious if you remember, criminal law or constitutional law, is that, open and obvious is a waiver to consent. So if you can see the gun, it's a waiver to consent. And that's how they would, continue to, up their statistics and get bad guys off the street, get guns off the streets, which, look, I'm a proponent of getting guns off the street, but you can't do it illegally. And that's what was happening. And so that's where I learned about police narratives, that police officers construct the narrative in order to justify whether it be a shooting, use of excessive force, or an unconstitutional stop, and anything in between that. So the learning curve from being a criminal, representing criminal defendants, to civil plaintiffs, I got to tell you, yes, there is a learning curve, but it's a lot of the same. Because, I deal with a lot of excessive force and use of deadly force cases, and we have to master all of those same steps as I did as a criminal defense attorney.
You've been doing this kind of work for over 20 years now, and, we all know your work on the George Floyd case and some of the other cases you've handled. I guess my question is this, for those of us that, I guess we're in the community, we see civil rights violations, we see the civil cases, and we see the shootings. And it seems like every couple of years, there's a big fire about how are we going to reform things, and then it dies off. And it seems to some of us that nothing ever really changes. And so I'm curious, in your career, have you seen it improve? And what suggestions would you have for making change?
Tad, that's such an excellent point, because you're right. We have seen so many, inflection points over the last 20, 30 years where we thought there would be change. We thought, with Michael Brown, maybe things would have changed then. Eric Garner, Tamir Rice, here in Chicago, Laquan McDonald. Every time there was this big promise of change, and we thought it would be coming. And it never did. It just ended with a thud. George Floyd has been different. Without question, George Floyd has created change. And it's very interesting how George created change. Before George, 3 months earlier, there was Breonna Taylor. Mm-hmm. And had George Floyd not happened, Breonna Taylor probably wouldn't have gotten the attention that she did, even in her death. Because, George Floyd, what we saw was basically a 10-minute reality TV show narrated by bystanders during a pandemic where people were glued to their TVs anyway. So George brought out not only himself, but also Breonna. And because of Breonna, we now know that no-knock warrants have been banned in many jurisdictions across the country. As a result of George, chokeholds and neck restraints have either been banned or severely curtailed. The House of Representatives passed the George Floyd police reform bill. And, we're waiting for the Senate, hopefully, to pass that. And we know that if the Senate passes it, President Biden will sign the bill. Those are all meaningful changes. Colorado has done away with qualified immunity since George Floyd. Illinois has a bill on its books to do away with qualified immunity. Minnesota, where George Floyd happened, not only with the reforms that they've put in place, but with the reforms they have planned. If all the reforms happen, which we are big proponents of, and we will help Minnesota and Minneapolis with passage of those bills and ordinances, Minnesota has the chance to be one of the best police states in our country constitutionally, where people will be respected and dignified. Look, Tad, I just finished, before I got on with you, Chief Arredondo is speaking on George Floyd, and I actually wrote down what he said, and I'm going to look at my notes for a second, because he said one of the chief missions in Minneapolis is to serve with compassion. That's a very strong statement. Yeah. Because we know that Derek Chauvin had no compassion for George Floyd when he was kneeling on his neck. Chief Arredondo said that we know that we are the first face of government and that people expect that police officers interact with them with dignity as we are their guardians. Those are strong statements. And you understand the magnitude of that. This is Chief Arredondo, the Minneapolis police chief, who is testifying on behalf of the prosecution against one of his own police officers. Honestly, for me, this is unprecedented. I have never seen this. If I were the defense lawyer, I would, I don't know, I'd hang my hat up and probably walk out. Now, I'm being a little dramatic about it, but that's the sort of change that we have seen occur as a result of the execution and torture of George Floyd. Yes, there is change. There will be change, and we cannot stop. I've joined a movement. I created the movement, and it's called the Whatever It Takes movement. So far, I know that I'm the only member. I might have 2 other members, but I know that I'm going to do whatever it takes to make sure that something like George Floyd doesn't happen again.
I think you'll have a lot of other people sign up for that movement, especially in these times. Plus, a lot of people would want to follow you in particular. I guess, you've been watching the criminal case, obviously. What are your thoughts based on what you've seen so far?
Well, the prosecution is taking a very slow and methodical approach. And I'm not being critical of them being slow. It's just the way they've done. They are literally taking a playbook to ensure that the jury understands the case. They are going in exact chronological order. Mm-hmm. Tad, you're a civil attorney, so am I. And, you and I, when we prepare for trial, we look for some of the best tactics in order to gain advantage with the jury, to capture their attention and make sure we win that case in the first day or two, at least make sure that we've, trained the jury to our case. The prosecution doesn't seem so willing to do that. They are going in exact chronological order. They are going with bystander witnesses. They are going with police officers and the paramedics. This morning was the first responding doctor at the Hennepin County Medical Center. Now they have Chief Arredondo. So they're taking a step-by-step approach. And so what they're doing is they're just feeding the jury. They're recreating the story for them exactly how it happened. And I think it's effective. It's a little bit of a slower approach, but in the end, what they're trying to show the jury is that what happened to George Floyd was not reasonable, that the bystanders were reasonable in knowing and identifying that George was dying and that Derek Chauvin was choking him and cutting off his ABCs, his airway, breathing, and circulation. They are trying to show the jury that the police officers on the scene afterwards, like Lieutenant Zimmerman, he was reasonable in identifying that Chauvin should not have been kneeling on his neck after he was restrained, meaning the handcuffs were put on him. You've got now Chief Arredondo, who I'm sure right now is saying that what he saw was against policy and that Derek Chauvin was never trained to kneel until someone would die. So for the defense, they really have no other defense other than the made you look defense, right? I'm gonna throw stuff up and I'm gonna make you look over here. I'm gonna make you look over there, hoping that they find one juror who'll hang.
Right. We all know obviously about the George Floyd case, or most everybody that's going to listen to this podcast is familiar with it. But I'm curious, over your 20 plus years of doing civil rights cases, what's the case that stands out most to you? Maybe what's the most important case to you that you've handled?
Well, I can tell you which one that is, Tad, and I'm still handling it. It's been part of my life now for over 10 years, actually. Wow. I've been working on this case for over 10 years. It's the case of Michael Laporta versus the City of Chicago. And it's a tragic case. Michael Laporta did not die, but he's catastrophically injured because he and his off-duty cop friend were out drinking one night, and his off-duty cop friend, who had been on the force for 5 years at the time, was somebody who probably never should have been a police officer. But because he knew somebody, he had clout, he got a job as a Chicago police officer. And during the 5 years up until he shot Michael Laporta in the head, he had accumulated 19 CRs, and those are complaint registers where citizens had complained against him for uses of excessive force. And during that period of time, he was also a beater. He used to beat his girlfriend. He beat his girlfriend's brother. He was just a bad guy. So he was charged with domestic violence a couple of times. But because Patrick Kelly was somebody who had juice in the Chicago Police Department, all of his charges would disappear. They would go away. He'd never be arrested. He'd never be charged. He'd never be disciplined. And so he became very used to acting with impunity. So when they were out drinking that night and there was an incident where Patrick Kelly's gun went off, it discharged. And Patrick Kelly called 911 and told everybody that Michael Laporta had just committed suicide in his house. Well, unbeknownst to Patrick Kelly, Michael Laporta was alive. Even though there was a bullet lodged in his head, this is like out of a movie. Michael Laporta was actually alive. He was not dead. And Mikey lived. And it took him 3.5 years to come out of his, coma, state of unconsciousness. And he eventually, not only did he regain some of his speech, but he regained memory along with that speech. And Mikey Laporta was able to tell a compelling story of who shot him that night. And it was Patrick Kelly who shot him. And we couldn't rely only on Michael Laporta telling us that Patrick Kelly shot him because of the catastrophic brain injury that he had. So we reconstructed the events of that night with about 10 scientists ranging from all sorts of discipline, from forensic to ballistics to biomechanical to physiotherapists to every sort of possible discipline in order so that we could construct a story for the jury. Those scientists' story was so compelling that after we won the case, we won an historic award against the city of Chicago for what's called a Monell claim. That on appeal, the city admitted that Patrick Kelly shot Michael Laporta, although they had defended the case that Patrick Kelly did not shoot and that Michael Laporta shot himself. So the city ultimately made an admission that Patrick Kelly shot Michael Laporta and that Patrick Kelly's gun and the bullets in his gun were the cause of Michael Laporta's injury, but they defended the case on a legal issue. And the Seventh Circuit reversed our jury verdict, and we are now currently on a certification for en banc petition. So I probably can't say too much more about that. But this case has been ongoing for 10 years, and it's a fight for justice, not only for Michael Laporta, but also for the citizens of the city of Chicago, because we won a Monell claim. We proved a custom practice and policy against the Chicago Police Department that because of their failure to discipline police officers, that those police officers can and will cause harm to members of the community. So it really was an historic verdict for the citizens of the city of Chicago. And we hope that the en banc panel now sees fit to rehear the case and reinstate the jury's verdict.
When that case is done, I'd love to get you on and go through that whole case, because that just sounds amazing. Yeah, I can't imagine.
Yeah, Tad. It's one of those stories where, I guess if I had the time and the effort, it'd be on one of those TV shows, because the scientific reconstruction was really masterful what these scientists did, and it was so good. It really was so good that the city of Chicago said, "Yep, that's the way it happened."
Yeah, I can't wait to see that. That'd be incredible. Well, before I let you go, you got some really talented young lawyers in your firm. And so, those of us who see your firm from the outside can tell you all do a great job of cultivating young talent. And, so I'm curious, do you have advice for young lawyers or even for mentors that have young lawyers? What can we do to help bring them along?
Well, Tad, you're right. I am so proud of the lawyers that work at our firm, and especially the young ones. And what we really do, we look for lawyers that not only are smart and great writers, but people that literally they want to play on a team. If you're not a team player, it's just not any. You just don't belong in our firm, and that's kind of just the way it is because we are so close. We work so closely with each other. We spend so much time with each other. We travel with each other. We eat dinner with each other. We go out for drinks with each other. We like each other. We do. And because of that camaraderie, we work well together. But the most important thing that our lawyers have is the love for client, where client is always first. And I have a saying at the office, and I don't shy away from it. You know, we're a law firm. We need to make money in order to pay everybody for the work that they put into the firm. But I always tell them, this is the way it works in our firm. It's client first and money second. If you ever put money first, hand me your resignation. Because if you put client first, the money will follow. That's just a simple maxim that we all believe in at the firm. And it's true. If we believe in our client, if we love the client, meaning that we love what we do every single day when we walk into the office, the rest of it will happen. The rest of it comes, I don't want to say easy because nothing is easy, but it'll be there. And that's kind of what keeps our firm going. It's that philosophy.
Tony, I'll leave it at that. And you're going to be on CNN probably in the next 10 minutes because you're always on CNN. So I don't want to take too much of your time when Wolf Blitzer is going to be your next interview. So
I appreciate it, Tad.
Thanks so much for being on, Tony. I really appreciate it.
You're one of the best, Tad, and I have just come to love you and respect you. And you know I'm going to be your wingman next year when you become president. I may not be on your executive committee or on that ladder, but I'll be right there with you.
I appreciate it, Tony. Looking forward to seeing you again soon.
Be well, my friend.
So I think I know what I'm going to get Tony for Christmas.
Yeah, what's that?
I'm going to get him a card table.
That's perfect.
I'm sure he misses the card table from his old office with the fax machine laying on the floor.
Yeah, I mean, if you started your own practice like you have, like I did, you get a little nostalgic about that stuff, right? So I'm sure he'd love that. I remember working.
I mean, I typing my own letters, and I remember trying to handle it was a class action, but there weren't a whole lot of plaintiffs, and just stamping all the envelopes myself and putting them all in the mail, and then showing up in court. And
I remember all of that. Everything, handling everything, soup to nuts. And it's funny because I was talking with a clerk today, and she was like, "Hey, is this your fax number?" And I was like, I honestly don't know the answer to that question.
I refuse to put it on anything. Anytime somebody has something that says, put your fax number on here, I will not put it on. We have one. I refuse to use it.
Yeah, I didn't know because, when we merged, I told her, I said, they don't give me that type of authority. But, I'm just the lawyer here. I don't make those types of decisions. But, 5-6 years ago, I'm figuring out if the fax breaks down or if the faxes are coming in physically, and I'm faxing things out physically. It's so funny how things change. And how much we really used to spend on administrative stuff.
Yeah, it's nice to see somebody like Tony, though, that went from something like that, card table and a fax machine on the floor, to 18, 19 lawyers, whatever they have there in Chicago. Incredible reputation, incredibly successful, and doing it for all the right reasons.
Success usually follows someone like Tony, because he is doing it for all the right reasons. Starting out in that, the Cook County Public Defenders, and then taking what he learned from there and applying it to his mission to protect everyone's constitutional and human rights. Mm-hmm. I can't imagine what it's like to work in that law firm. I'm sure it's just awesome working with a guy like him.
Yeah, he's got a lot of talented young lawyers in there. I actually interviewed someone today who is interested in an administrative spot. And, you know, I said, you know, hey, tell me about yourself. Why are you interested in, you know, coming in for a law firm? And it reminded me a lot of, you know, Tony's background. And, you know, I guess a little bit different, but, you know, she grew up in Brooklyn, New York, a very poverty stricken area up there. She was all about, you know, hey, you know, people who are indigent do not get good legal representation. She's not even in law school yet, but that's like her priority. You know, she wants to go to law school. She wants to take care of people who've been victims of civil rights violations, who don't have the money to afford a lawyer. And it reminded me a lot of our conversation with Tony yesterday.
You know, and the other thing too is I remember an analyst talking about the criminal case and saying when the defense gets up and starts making its case, you're going to hear a lot of things that are going to make you angry if you're sensitive to this stuff, because they're going to start pointing the finger at George Floyd. They're going to start making accusations. They're going to start saying things. Knowing that someone's on the front line fighting for people like George Floyd and his family allows all of us to sleep a little better at night, whether or not we realize it or not. So just, that's awesome. I love to hear it. We got to have more people like him and like this person you interviewed involved in the profession.
Yeah. You know, when he gets done with that other case he was talking about, you need to get him on your podcast to talk about, you know, breaking down the case, you know, from the very beginning. You know, I've seen some of the demonstratives that Tony uses in his trials and, you know, the technology that they bring. You know, they try cases at a very high level, a very talented manner. I think he'd be great for you to have on that podcast.
You were talking about one of the talented people in his office, Michael Greco. I'm not sure if I'm saying that name right or not. They were talking about this outstanding result on LinkedIn. He wasn't talking about it, but someone was. And then whenever he described the number of depots they did, which was unbelievable, and the machine they got going, you know, it just kind of speaks to, hey, they're committed. They're all in, they're going for it. So it's fantastic to hear.
Yeah. Well, Mike, good podcast. Hopefully by the time we record another one of these, we'll actually have a trial going.
I hope.
Yeah.
I hope someone somewhere might.
Yeah, it sounds like it. So things are opening back up sooner or later. So.
Yep.
All right, man. We'll talk to you later.
Good brother.
That wraps another episode of the official Lawyer Minds podcast. Please consider subscribing to the show wherever you listen to podcasts. Explore the other content Lawyer Minds has to offer and engage with us on social media. Your feedback on the show and ideas for future shows is always welcomed. See you next time.